Carl Jung believed something that sounded strange for his time, and honestly, still surprises people today. He believed every single person carries both masculine and feminine energy inside them, regardless of their gender, not as an identity label, but as psychological forces working quietly underneath the surface. Quick note before we dive in. This is Jung's own theory, developed in the early 1900s, shaped by the language and assumptions of his era. Modern psychology has moved in a lot of directions since then, and gender itself is understood very differently today. So think of this less as the final answer and more as a fascinating piece of psychological history that still offers real insight into how the mind works. Jung's core idea was balance. He believed the healthiest human psyche isn't purely one thing or another. It's a blend of opposing energies working together, similar to the way the ancient yin-yang symbol represents two halves forming one whole. In Jung's framework, he described two inner forces: the anima, which he associated with feminine qualities like emotion, intuition, and receptiveness, and the animus, which he associated with masculine qualities like logic, assertiveness, and structure. He believed both exist inside every person, just expressed differently. Jung argued that in a man's psyche, the anima represents his unconscious feminine side, the emotional, intuitive part of himself that society often taught him to hide behind a more rigid, strong, and unemotional outer mask. According to Jung, when a man ignores his anima entirely, it doesn't disappear. It operates in the background, sometimes showing up as unexplained moodiness, oversensitivity in unexpected moments, or difficulty understanding his own emotional reactions. He believed the goal wasn't to suppress this inner feminine energy, but to actually get to know it, to understand it as a genuine part of the self, not a weakness to hide away. On the other side, Jung described the animus as the unconscious masculine energy within a woman's psyche, linked to logic, decisiveness, and assertive thinking. He believed that when a woman connects with her animus in a healthy way, it shows up as clarity, confidence, and the ability to think independently and assert her own perspective, rather than the animus operating in more rigid or overly critical ways when left unexamined. The key idea Jung kept returning to was integration, not separation. He didn't believe masculine and feminine energy were meant to compete with each other. He believed real psychological wholeness comes from both existing together, in balance, inside the same person. Jung believed most people, without realizing it, lean heavily into whichever traits their culture expects from them, while pushing the opposite traits into the unconscious. A man raised to always appear tough might bury his emotional side completely. A woman raised to always appear agreeable might bury her assertive side completely. But Jung believed the goal of psychological growth was rebalancing that scale, not becoming someone completely different, but reclaiming the parts of yourself that got quietly pushed aside along the way. This is where Jung's idea gets especially interesting. He believed the anima or animus often shows up symbolically in dreams, appearing as an unfamiliar figure of the opposite inner energy, guiding, challenging, or confusing the dreamer. He saw this inner figure almost like a companion inside the psyche, not a separate person, but a representation of the parts of yourself that haven't been fully acknowledged yet. Jung believed that instead of fearing or dismissing this inner figure, real growth comes from approaching it with curiosity, getting to know that hidden half of yourself instead of pushing it further away. This is part of why Jung was such a strong believer in journaling and reflecting on dreams. He saw them as messages from the unconscious, offering clues about which parts of the self were asking to be understood. So how does someone actually work with this idea in real life? Jung believed the first step was simply noticing, paying attention to the traits you push away, the emotions you dismiss, the strengths you don't fully claim. The next step, according to Jung, was gently opening the door to those traits, rather than forcing dramatic change. A logical person practicing emotional openness, an emotional person practicing structured decision-making, small, steady steps toward balance. Jung believed this process, which he called individuation, wasn't about becoming a completely different person. It was about becoming a more complete version of the person you already are, integrating the parts that were always there, just unseen. He described psychological wholeness as a kind of inner harmony, not the absence of opposing traits, but the peaceful coexistence of them, working together instead of one hiding the other. It's a bit like a tree, strong, structured roots and trunk, balanced by soft, flexible branches that bend without breaking. Neither half makes the tree weaker. Together, they're what make it whole and resilient. Jung's ultimate belief was that no one is purely one thing. Logic and emotion, strength and softness, structure and intuition. These aren't opposites fighting for control. In his view, they're simply different tools within the same mind, each valuable in its own moment. Let's bring it together. Jung believed everyone carries both masculine and feminine psychological energy. The anima representing intuitive, emotional qualities. The animus representing logical, assertive qualities. Suppressing either side doesn't erase it. It just pushes it into the unconscious, where it can show up in confusing ways. These energies often appear symbolically in dreams. Real growth, which Jung called individuation, comes from noticing, understanding, and gently integrating both sides, not choosing one over the other. This theory, developed over 100 years ago, still offers something valuable today. The idea that wholeness isn't about fitting into a narrow box. It's about becoming familiar with every part of your inner world instead of only the parts that feel socially convenient. Whether or not you agree with every detail of Jung's original framework, the deeper message holds up well. Don't fear the parts of yourself that don't match the mask you usually wear. They might be exactly the parts worth getting to know. Jung wasn't trying to divide people into categories. He was trying to describe something more like harmony, the quiet coexistence of opposites that together make a person whole. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Not labels, not boxes, just the idea that balance inside your own mind tends to feel a lot more peaceful than constant internal conflict. So here's something worth sitting with. Which side of yourself have you been leaning on the most? And which side has quietly gone unheard for a while? What did you think of Jung's theory of the anima and animus? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your take, especially if you see it differently. And if you enjoy exploring deep psychology like this, hit subscribe, because we're breaking down minds like Jung's every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.